Hey, this is Cole. Welcome to my first movie review on the channel, and today we are starting a review series, and today's movie I'm going to be reviewing is the 1978 superhero classic movie, and that of course is Superman the movie starring Christopher Reeve from 1978. And like I said, this is going to be the start to a review series because on the date I'm recording this, it is July 9th, but on July 11th of 2025, we have a brand new Superman movie coming to theaters that's going to be directed by James Gunn, who did the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and it is going to be a full reboot of the DC universe. So before I see that movie, I might as well tackle the previous Superman movies. And for this review series in particular, I'm not going to review Justice League 2017 or Zack Snyder's Justice League, the director's cut, because I view those more as Batman movies than Superman movies because Superman is barely in those movies and Batman is the main character in Justice League, whether it's the theatrical cut or the superior Zack Snyder cut. So I will save those reviews sometime later down the road for like a Batman review series, but right now we're going to focus on Superman. With, of course, the movie that started it all, Superman the movie from 1978 starring Christopher Reeve. I mean, this DVD case really don't like me today, and I actually got it in this 5-movie collection I got off Amazon for $10. This comes with like the first 4 Christopher Reeve movies from 1978 to 1987, as well as the 2006 movie Superman Returns. But unfortunately with this set, when it comes to Superman 2, it only comes with the director's cut, the Richard Donner cut. So I wanted to have the theatrical cut, so I bought Superman 2 separately here, which that's the version I will be reviewing after I'm done reviewing this movie. But yeah. So what is the plot to Superman the movie from 1978? The plot of the movie is as follows. An alien orphan is sent from his dying planet to Earth, where he grows up to become his adoptive home's first and greatest superhero. So that's basically the simple premise to this movie. I mean, it's Superman. I mean, everyone knows who Superman is. Even if they have not seen this movie in particular, they know who Superman is. Like that is how iconic Superman is as a character, where even people who haven't seen any of the Superman movies know who he is. That's how iconic of a character he is. And he was first created by DC Comics in 1938, and I mean, Superman is an important character in comic books because without Superman, without Superman, you would not have Batman, you would not have Spider-Man, and a lot of these other iconic known superheroes you would not have if it wasn't for Superman. And this movie in particular, Superman the movie from 1978, is a very important movie. So how was Superman the movie received when it came out in 1978? When the movie released in 1978, it was a box office hit, both critically and financially, making $384 million worldwide off an $80 million budget. And when Superman the movie came out, the movie received positive reviews from critics and audiences, and it was a mega box office hit. And because of how successful it was, and because of all the critical acclaim it got from critics and audiences, they did 3 sequels to it. And then they did the 2006 movie Superman Returns, and then the 2013 reboot Man of Steel. But I'll get to those movies when I review them for now. But I would say of the Superman movies, this is definitely my favorite. Now, I do rather like Superman 2 from 1980. I do think that is a rather good sequel. I will be covering that next, but I just like the first movie a little better for reasons I'm going to tackle. I like how it's an origin story of the character and how we get to see how Superman becomes Superman. But getting into what I like about the movie, this movie has a fantastic cast. You got Christopher Reeve as Clark Kent, aka Superman, who is still the best Superman all these years later. You got Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor, who Gene Hackman is, I mean, to this day, Gene Hackman is easily the best Lex Luthor. It was cool to see him play a bad guy. I mean, this movie is what made Gene Hackman a really big star. And this review is dedicated to Gene Hackman's memory because Gene Hackman passed away earlier this year. Rest in peace, Gene Hackman. But yeah, Gene Hackman I have always really liked as an actor. Whether it's him as Lex Luthor in these Superman movies, Uncommon Valor, which is a very underrated war movie from the 1980s, Enemy of the State with him and Will Smith, one of my favorite Tony Scott movies, Crimson Tide, another great movie with Gene Hackman, directed by Tony Scott. The 1998 DreamWorks animated movie Ants, because he did voice a character in that movie. And the 1992 Western movie directed and starring Clint Eastwood, Unforgiven, which is easily my favorite Gene Hackman movie because, again, Gene Hackman is always really good at playing bad guys, and he plays a really good bad guy in that movie. And just, I was sad when I heard Gene Hackman passed away this year because I'll definitely remember him as long as I live, and he was easily, one of my favorite actors of all time, because Gene Hackman's a great actor, even in a movie that's not so good, like Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, terrible sequel. He's like one of the few positive things to that movie, but yeah. Margot Kidder was a great choice for Lois Lane, and Marlon Brando, despite having a limited role in this movie, was great as Superman's space dad, Jor-El. I thought Glenn Ford was great as Jonathan Kent, which is the farmer who finds the alien baby, aka the main character, and raises it as his own, as well as the mother or his wife, Martha Kent, who is played by Phyllis Thaxter, who I'm not too familiar with as actress, but I thought she did a great job in the movie. But yeah, Superman, when it comes to the character Superman, I've always been a big fan of Superman. In fact, I actually have some comic books here. I have this comic book, Superman 78, The Metal Curtain, which is like a sequel continuation of the Christopher Reeve movie, so that's pretty cool. So I have not yet read this one. I would like to give that a read. I have, however, read the 1992 comic book, The Death of Superman, which is a great comic book, and this was the introduction to Doomsday, one of my favorite comic book villains. Was not a fan of Batman vs. Superman. I thought they did a terrible job with Doomsday, and I thought Man of Steel was a better movie, but I'll get to those when I get to those. Then I also have this Superman comic here, which, yes, I know this comic book's not in the best condition, but, got this cool little thing in here. Then I got this comic, again, not in the best position. I mean, this comic I've had for over a decade. It was at my grandma's and left in a bin that was not in the best condition, but I still have these comic books. And then I got this cool one here, DC versus Vampires, which is pretty cool. And I don't have it with me in my room because my sister borrowed it, but I also have a DC comic book called Deceased, where a bunch of the DC characters like Batman and Superman have to fight zombies, which is a rather cool comic book. But there is one Superman comic book I have not yet read. I am going to read very soon, and that is the 1996 comic book Kingdom Come. And the reason I'm going to read this comic book soon is because I heard the new Superman movie from 2025 is going to be based on this storyline. So I might as well see what I'm getting myself into first. But yeah. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into my review of this great classic movie. Oh, and another thing I forgot to mention with Superman the movie from 1978 before we get into the review. This movie was directed by Richard Donner, Richard Donner is a fantastic director. Richard Donner is one of my favorite movie directors of all time. He directed this movie. He directed the 1985 comedy movie The Goonies, which I love The Goonies as a childhood classic. That is easily my favorite Richard Donner movie. He also directed the 1988 Christmas comedy movie Scrooged with Bill Murray, which is one of my favorite Christmas movies. He also directed all 4 of the Lethal Weapon movies, and he also directed the 1976 horror movie The Omen. But just, yeah, Richard Donner, I've always really liked as a director, and this is easily one of his best movies. But without further ado, let's get into my review of Superman the movie. The movie starts off in the Fortress of Solitude, where we are introduced to the Elders, a group of evil Kryptonites, where the leader wants a person to join the bad guys, but the person refuses, and then gets trapped in a mirror, basically, with a few other Kryptonites. We then cut to Krypton, where we are introduced to Superman's dad, Jor-El, who Jor-El in this movie is played by Marlon Brando, who of course, played The Godfather in of course the iconic beloved 1972 movie The Godfather, which I do really like the first 2 Godfather movies. Heck, I know a lot of people don't like it, but I am one of the few people who likes The Godfather Part 3. I don't think that sequel is anywhere near as bad as people say it is, but that's just my opinion. But I'm getting off track here. Anyways, getting back to the review of the movie itself, we are introduced to Jor-El, who is Superman's dad, and Jor-El realizes that the planet will explode within 30 days, killing him and, pretty much everyone on the planet. So because of that, Jor-El and his wife make a space shuttle to put their son in, so he is brought to Earth so the son survives, basically. Which is a very smart idea. I really like the scene in the movie where Jor-El and, his wife, they basically send Superman in the space shuttle to go to Earth, but before we see that, after the space shuttle is launched off the planet, I like how we see the destruction on Krypton. Very well done scene with really good practical effects. I mean, I gotta give it to this movie. This movie, I like how in this movie, all of the destruction scenes are done with practical effects, which you don't really see that in movies anymore. And it's a shame that they decide to overuse it with CGI, but it is what it is. But it's still really good in this movie. Anyways, getting back to it, I like the scene where baby Superman in his space shuttle crashes on the ground, startling Jonathan Kent and Martha Kent, who stop the truck that they're driving. They then see the space shuttle, and the baby is walking out the space shuttle. And I like the part where Martha and Jonathan, they're talking about the baby, and, Jonathan's like, he's suggesting that the baby might be an alien from another planet, but Martha's like, oh, whatever. But then the baby, with its super strength, picks up the truck the baby uses its super strength. It decides to lift up the truck as if it's as light as a pencil, which obviously freaks out, Jonathan and Martha, but it also amazes them at the same time, and they're just in awe at what they see. The movie then cuts to many years later, where Superman was named Clark Kent by his parents on Earth. The people who raised him, because as we all know, his real parents passed away. But anyways, getting back to the review of the movie itself, we cut to many years later where Clark Kent is now a teenager, and he's a well-liked character and a school football player. I also enjoyed the scene where no one is looking and Clark Kent kicks the football insanely far, and then Clark Kent, he sees that a train is on the train track, and Clark Kent decides to race the train with his super speed. And a young girl named Lois Lane, who does play a big part in this movie, which we'll get to, who is like maybe 10 years old in this movie, she is looking through her binoculars. She sees that Superman is going faster than the train, or Clark Kent, and she's amazed at what she sees. She points it out to her parents, but her parents don't see it, and her parents are like, oh, it would make a great story. And Lois Lane is like, nobody ever believes me. I also really like the father and son dynamic in this movie, where Superman / Clark Kent beats his friends. He basically beats his friends in a race to get to his house because his friends drive a car. And obviously that confuses them. And then his friends ask, "Wait a minute, how did you get here so fast?" And Clark says, "I ran." And then, the friends drive the car away, and then Jonathan Kent says, "Showing off, are you?" And then Clark says to his dad, "I didn't mean to show off, Pa." I like when Clark, who hates Brad, a school student, says, "I wish I could tear him apart." And then Jonathan says, "Yeah, I know." Here's the thing I like about Clark Kent as a character. He is smart enough to know that that is not the right thing to do and that'll make it look bad. So Clark Kent says, "I probably shouldn't." So, yeah, the kid, as much as he hates this bully, at least he has the common sense not to do that. I also like when early on in the movie, Superman, aka Clark Kent, is at a funeral of a friend a friend of his that passed away recently, and Clark Kent says, "Those things I can do, all those powers I have, and I couldn't save him." And Clark Kent is crying. And now of course Christopher Reeve is the one who plays adult Superman. I'm not familiar with the actor who played teenage Superman in this movie, but I thought he did a good job. Later that night, Clark goes into the barn and finds a green kryptonite crystal, which, if you're a fan of Superman, you know about him, you know that kryptonite is his weakness. But anyways, the next morning, Clark Kent is outside, staring into the sunset. The mother walks out, and Superman says that, "Yeah, I gotta leave," and stuff like that. And, I gotta move out, responsibilities and all of that. The mother's sad, but she understands. Not long after that, Clark Kent, he decides to go to the Arctic, and he chucks the kryptonite crystal into the water, which causes the water to go crazy, and ice comes out of the water, creating the Fortress of Solitude, which was destroyed, but, it gets rebuilt, which, again, if you know Superman, you know that the Fortress of Solitude is where Superman, it's his secret hangout, basically. Then a hologram of Jor-El speaks to Clark, saying, "Since you're 18, it's time you knew the truth." And then Jor-El, he tells Clark Kent that Clark Kent, he is not from Earth, and his real family died years ago on planet Krypton, but Clark has been sent to Earth to protect it. The movie then cuts to years later where Superman gets a job at the Daily Planet. He works as a newspaper publisher, but he goes there as Clark Kent, and Superman is his secret Superman's secret identity is Clark Kent. No one knows he's Superman, but all people who know Superman, even if they haven't seen this, know that, because he's that well known and iconic of a character. Clark then meets Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen. I thought Superman / Clark Kent, played by Christopher Reeve, and Lois Lane, played by Margot Kidder, had great chemistry in this movie. You definitely believe them as friends. Not long after that, they meet a robber with a gun in an alleyway who threatens to hurt Lois if she doesn't give over her purse. So Lois agrees to give the purse to him, but Lois drops it on the ground. But before the bad guy is about to grab the purse, Lois Lane, she kicks the bad guy in the chest. But before the bad guy can hurt Lois Lane, Superman, aka Clark Kent, catches the bullet with his hand, and the robber runs away. And Superman falls to the ground, but he's okay. And Superman says to Lois, "I think I fainted." Lois is like, "Fainted," and stuff like that, We are then introduced to the main villain of the movie, Lex Luthor, who once again is played by Gene Hackman, who, again, Gene Hackman's a great actor, and he played a great Lex Luthor. And in this movie, the villain's intention is to profit from a real estate scheme by triggering a massive earthquake in California by launching some missiles, which is a rather genius idea for a villain. My favorite scene, I would say my favorite scene in this movie is when a helicopter crashes with Lois Lane in it, and the helicopter is hanging over the side of a building, and Lois Lane is hanging over the edge, about to fall, and everyone is down on the ground watching, including Clark Kent. So Clark Kent decides to get on his Superman suit and he decides to rescue Lois Lane. Because Lois Lane is holding onto a strap attached to the helicopter when she unbuckles, but it accidentally slips. She's falling and stuff like that, but Superman is able to rescue her, and Superman also rescues the helicopter in the process of it and sets the helicopter on top of the building. I also like the scene where Superman rescues a girl's cat from a tree. I thought that was a rather heartwarming scene, as I like cats. I mean, granted, I prefer dogs, but I like cats too. I like when Superman shows up at Lois's apartment and Lois interviews Superman, asking him questions. I like the scene where Superman takes Lois Lane on her first flight. That's definitely a very iconic scene of cinema that is well remembered. I like the part where Clark shows up at Lois's apartment no longer wearing his Superman suit, and she suspects Clark Kent might be Superman, but she doesn't know for sure. And Superman's like, we're going to be late to dinner, we got to go and stuff like that. And, she agrees. But when it comes to the bad guy of this movie, Lex Luthor, played by Gene Hackman, he is able to perfectly blend into society, making everyone think he is completely innocent, when really, we all know he's not. I like the scene where, with a robotic telepathic voice, Lex Luthor causes ringing in Superman's ear and is talking to him. Clark leaves the building when no one is looking, gets on his Superman suit, and flies across Metropolis and goes underground to search for Lex Luthor, but Lex Luthor is smart to slow Superman down. He basically activates machine guns in the wall shooting at Superman, but the bullets do nothing to Superman, and neither does the fire. But then Lex Luthor decides to freeze Superman with a freeze ray machine, which at first it does work, but then Superman is able to bust out of it with super strength. And he decides to come to Lex Luthor. I like this, I like the scene where Superman starts to interrogate Lex Luthor, asking, where is the gas power? And then I like the part where Lex Luthor says, in my mind, actually, it's a little idea I was toying with. Superman then says, is that how a warped mind like yours gets tricks? By planning the death of innocent people? Lex Luthor says no, by causing the death of innocent people. Lex Luthor launches 2 missiles and says to Superman, even with your super strength, you cannot stop both missiles and save everyone. I can only stop it with my detonator. And then I like the part where Superman picks up Lex Luthor, interrogating him, asking where is the detonator? Then he decides to let Lex Luthor down as he uses his vision to see through some stuff. And I like the part where Superman says to him, you diseased maniac. You really think you can hide it from me by casing it in lead? I'll mold this box into your prison bars. Superman opens the box and he sees that it's his weakness, kryptonite, which the kryptonite is attached to a necklace, and Lex Luthor puts the necklace on Superman, slowing him down and stuff like that. And Lex Luthor's female assistant, she basically is crying. She basically says to Lex Luthor that her mother lives in California, but Lex Luthor shrugs it off and walks away. And Lex's girlfriend feels bad, but Superman gets the necklace off, and she agrees to let Superman free only if he saves her mother first, which he agrees to, and she kisses Superman for that. Superman then flies away to save the day. I like the scene where Superman stops some of the missiles and throws it into space, where he stops one of the missiles and throws it into space. But I like the scene where Superman stops one of the missiles, throws it into space, but he fails to stop the other mission, which hits the ground, and the missile causes an earthquake. I like the scene where there's a school bus of kids. It's about to fall off the San Francisco Bridge, but Superman rescues the bus. And then at the end of the movie, it's very tragic. Lois Lane is caught in a terrible accident. Lois Lane dies, and Superman is so mad about it. Superman decides Superman decides to spin the Earth backwards. That way he can reverse time and get Lois Lane back so she's no longer dead, which I think is a rather heartwarming ending. And then the movie ends where Superman, he puts Lex Luthor in jail, and then the movie ends where he flies into space and he smiles at the camera. So yeah, at the end of the day, this is a really good movie. If I only have a minor complaints with this movie, the special effects do hold up very well for the most part, but there is some scenes where it does look a little dated, particularly at the ending when he spins the Earth around, but that would honestly really be my only complaint. Other than that, Superman the movie is a great superhero movie. There is a reason that this movie is considered one of the best this movie is considered one of the best movies of all time by audiences and critics, and for good reason, because this is a great movie. And so yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to give Superman the movie a 9 out of 10. So yeah. Next up, we're going to review Superman 2, which is a rather good sequel. But until then, we'll catch you later. Bye-bye.